everybody, it's Taylor, your host, back with Talk with Tay. So today, I'm in a little different of a setup, and that's because I took a little trip back to my hometown for a couple days to get a little reset. It kind of be like that sometimes for my mental health. So I'm in my mom's office filming, so that's why it looks a little different. And I want to kind of share vital parts of my story within like around 10 episodes, where it's going to be a little bit heavier, and then after we get through those of mostly myself, of like traumatic things that have kind of brought me into where I'm at today, I'm going to start bringing other people on to kind of talk, share their own stories, advice, and whatever else you guys want to hear. So today I'm going to be talking about a very, very touchy subject to anybody, I would say, and my own experiences. Obviously, I can't speak for others, and I cannot speak on top of anyone else's experiences. I can only speak on my own and how I felt and how I overcame these things and how they, shaped me into where I'm at today. But I'm going to be talking about being a sexual assault survivor, and I'm going to include, I think, one big story and more so just my thought on it and how that's affected me in my relationship and everything so forth. It's kind of like, it's just difficult because it's difficult to talk about this subject. It's difficult to be vulnerable about this subject on the internet. Even if people near, like closest to me know some of these things, it's very personal, and it's a very, I kind of, said this in my intro video, this is a very voodoo topic, anything to deal with abuse, especially sexual abuse, because it's a very traumatizing thing, and it will most likely affect you for the rest of your life in certain ways. Same way with all types of abuse or traumas that anybody faces. It affects the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you act in your relationships, how you show up for your relationships, how you are as an individual, what different triggers you get based off of things that maybe somebody else would never have if they didn't have the same experience and stuff like that. So I'm going to give a little bit of a story time. And I'm going to kind of give a little bit of leading up to that story time and give just one story and then the events that came after that. So, like I had said, and if you haven't watched the other episodes, if you want a little bit more of a backstory, then shameless promo, go watch those, go listen to them, whatever you're watching or listening on, to get a little bit more of a feel. But I kind of explained and kind of just touched over briefly that the way I did grow up I did suffer from sexual abuse from a few members in my family, few male members, and it started at very, very, very young age. Very, very young. And to the point of when I have gone to like therapy and kind of started working through my own shit, like I didn't even realize what had really happened. It's so crazy how the brain works, how it literally protects you by storing different memories into parts of your brain where you try to like forget things even happen until you start to work through them, and then your mind starts to like remember things. It's really insane. But anyways, I remember as a little girl, as I started to do this work, I didn't realize that I had been molested and was and what was happening. I knew in the moment I felt like something wasn't right, and I think that's just maybe human instinct. But as a little girl, like 3 or 4 years old, you don't know. I mean, you're kind of somewhat taught, I feel like, at a certain age, like your private parts, and I was not really taught like, oh, these are supposed to be like respected, like no one else is supposed to touch them and all that sort of thing. So I was obviously exposed from a very young age. Years go by. Like I had said, my father's house was a very chaotic household. There was a lot of promiscuity from him and the partners that he was with. And I remember when I was about 8, because that's when, so I was 8 years old. We were on a family trip, and I remember I was with my dad. I was at my dad's, and I remember that he like gave me his iPad to watch movies or something on. So I obviously did that. And then when I was kind of scrolling through the iPad, I mean, I was just kind of like looking through it at that point, I had come across videos, pictures, plethora of them, of my father, pictures of him nude, genitals, videos of him with women, intercourse-wise, pictures of other women naked, everything like that. And obviously it just kind of, it almost like triggered a part of me that was like, I wouldn't say I became interested in it, but was just kind of like, oh, like this is, I knew it wasn't like right, but I also didn't really know if it was wrong, because I just kind of like, my mind just kind of started to get like curious. I'm kind of know about these things a little bit, but this is like right in front of me. Maybe this is like kind of just like triggered a part of me. Physically, it would give me like these weird feelings, and so I just started to look things up, because I was, curious about what I was even watching, what it was. And the internet is a scary place, and I mean, this was years ago, so YouTube and stuff was still pretty new, and there weren't very many, I mean, you could really find anything. Like, there wasn't really ways of like hiding, stuff that was like censored for children or whatever. So anyways, so I started, deep diving into the internet, looking things up, and things would pop up off of other things, and just kind of got me into this dive. And that is what started my first time of watching pornography. And this is a very sensitive topic for me to speak on, especially as a woman, because I know there is a stigma that it's normal for men or boys to watch pornography, and it's not normal if a girl does, or which it's not normal if a man does either. But that's a whole different topic we could get into with my opinion on that. And I think I can speak upon it because I have actually been on the other end of it. I'm not just a woman, speaking on it. I've come from personal experience. I know how it affects all parts of you in that way. It started becoming, I don't know, I started asking for his iPad more often, and I didn't know that, like, I didn't think what I was doing was right, but I also didn't know if it was wrong, but I just knew like I would probably get in trouble. So I just kind of like tried to hide it. And I started, watching more things as time went on, and more things. And I mean, it got to the point where I was so consumed and desensitized that I like, nothing surprised me anymore. I feel like I had seen everything. I'd watched everything. And as a young kid, that young little girl, like, that's not something that you want to be, exposed to. But so this goes on for probably months of me watching. And I remember I went to a gymnastics camp in Tehachapi, so it was about like 5-hour drive or something. My stepmom at the time was picking me up, and with my older sister, and we were driving home, and she was like, I need to talk to you, Taylor, like, we have to talk to you about something. And it's just like her in the car. So I was like, okay. And then she kind of basically brought it up and was like, we were looking through the history on the like iPad, and I mean, I was so young, I didn't know what clearing history was or any of that stuff, so it was just all out there at this point, right? Everything I'd seen, everything I'd been watching was just, everyone could see it what it was. And I knew as soon as she said that, I was like just filled with so much shame, and I just kind of like was so, I didn't speak, I didn't say anything. Basically, like, I don't know, she kind of talked to me about it and was just like, that's not okay, like, all this stuff. And I just felt like I just went mute. And so fast forward to around middle school, or elementary school. Like I said, I had become so desensitized from all things sexual because I had witnessed so much and also endured stuff. And I, like, during this time, I couldn't even watch movies where people would kiss or show any sort of affection. I needed to leave the room if I saw people showing affection. It would like just do something so weird to me inside. I can't even explain what it would, but I couldn't do it. I just tried to suppress that. So coming up towards around like middle school, I want to say, which was probably like maybe 2 years later or something. Obviously that's when kids start to kind of get curious about things and like ask things, or a lot of times that's when, you know, quote unquote boys will start watching things. Or I feel like the way I acted and the way I carried myself, everyone kind of just assumed I just knew everything already. Like I was just born that way. Like I just knew everything. And kids would come up to me and they would always ask me like, oh, what does this mean? Or what is this? Or what do I do about this? Or what should I do about this? Or do you know what this is? Have you ever done this? Or all these things. And it was funny because I was like, I don't know when I became like the tell-all, know-all thing, but I guess that's just kind of, you can tell by the way somebody talks, and like I said, they would walk. You can tell if they've more experienced, if they know what they're talking about. You know, it's just kind of how it is. Like I said, I started becoming the, you know, tell-all, know-all, whatever. And this is when I had started, you know, getting with guys for the first time. And I remember, like, the first time I was ever, like, intimate, like, one-on-one with somebody. It was, like, 7th grade, I want to say, which some people think that's normal. Some people think that's really young. Some people think that, I don't know. Everyone's comes from different backgrounds. But now thinking of it, I was really young. I feel like this is going to get so personal, and I don't want it to, like, be so explicit. But then also at the same time, I know you guys, like, just... I don't know. People are just so curious about hearing explicit things. So I guess, you know, gotta kind of do it. But anyways, so I started doing things sexually with guys at around, like, I would say 12, 13, 12. Yeah, about 12. And by this point, probably 12, 13-ish, people started, like, getting word around town that, like, you know, we lived in a small town, that I had, you know, done X, Y, and Z with somebody, and that started becoming like, oh, now guys are thinking, oh, I'm just, you know, that person, which I wasn't. I just felt like I was so detached and so withdrawn from that part of me that all these things, they didn't seem like big things that I was doing, and they didn't seem like it was gonna, like, affect me, or that it was, you know, it was gonna make me end up being labeled later on, because that was just normal to me at this point. This is what I was, you know, I grew up at a young age seeing this and having this happen, and then watching these things and watching my, you know, parental figure putting this even on the internet, and it's like, oh, like, this stuff is just, like, normal, right? So the only thing that I had not done by this point, by this age, was go all the way. And so I still technically had my virginity, whatever you want to call that. I don't know how you want to say that. I hadn't had sex yet. And I knew in my heart, I was like, okay, no matter what I've witnessed, no matter what I've done, I have this one thing I can hold on to, right? And I was like, this is what I'm going to hold on to. Like, I've had all these things happen to me in my life. All these things have been taken away from me already. My innocence, boundaries in other ways, but, like, this one thing I'm going to hold on to, and I'm going to stick to that. So we go to freshman year of high school, and there's this guy, and mind you, if we back it up a little bit, this guy I had known for years previously through I had a mutual friend, and she had an older brother at this time, and they were friends when they were in middle school, and I was, like, 5th grade, 6th grade. So he was, like, 3 years older than us. And at this time I didn't know what grooming was either, and I didn't know, until, usually don't realize until something happens to you afterwards, like, oh, that person was doing this. And it usually, a lot of time, not saying most, but sometimes when it comes to like sexual abuse or sexual assault, the abuser will groom the person with sometimes not even knowing that they're doing it, and almost see how far they can get with that person until that person either shuts it down or lets something happen or whatever. So I remember, like, I know I kind of went forward, but just with this situation, if I back it up just to give a little bit of a brief story, like I said, I'd met him through other mutual friends when I was younger, and I always got kind of a vibe that like maybe he like thought I was cute, or I don't know. But like I just remember even like playing like hide and go seek in the dark with all of them, like when we all have sleepovers or whatever, and he'd always just like want to like hide with me, and he'd always be kind of like touchy, but like never actually did anything. So like I didn't think anything of it really. I just thought he was just, I don't know, being nice, and just maybe like had like a little crush on me, even though he was like years older than me. Fast forward freshman year, he is at my school, obviously, and he is 17. I believe he was 17, and I think I was either 13 or just turned 14. So it was one of those two. I can't exactly remember. I don't know. He ended up kind of like adding me on Snapchat, and we would text a little bit, and then, we would start flirting, and he knew that I had probably like, just by the way I talked and the way that people, like I said, we lived in a small town. He probably knew that I'd already done some things or whatever. So he probably wanted to see like what he could do with that. So I remember one night he picked me up from my friend's house that I was staying at. And because he was like, oh, let's hang out. Like, da-da-da-da-da. Like, I want to hang out. And I was like, all right, whatever. Like, this guy's giving me attention. I'm, a little 13, 14-year-old, and he's older, upperclassman. He's cute. Like, why not? And so I remember he picked me up, and he drove me in his car, and he drove me to like this viewpoint, and I don't know, we talked for a little bit, and then one thing led to another. We started, doing stuff with one another, and it kind of went pretty quickly to most things. We were both completely nude, and he was about to try to have sex with me, and I immediately just stopped, and I was like, no, like just straight up, no, I don't want to have sex with you. I don't want this to be my first time. I don't want that. I don't really think I have to give an explanation of why, but I felt like I did, but I was just like, I just don't want to. And he was kind of like, why, da-da-da-da. And I was just like, I stuck to it pretty hard. I was like, no, it's not happening. Like, if that's what it is, like, we're done, like right now. Because that's the only thing left I have to hold on to for myself, and I'm gonna stick as firm to that, and I'm gonna do it. And so he was like, okay. And then basically after that, drove me home, and yeah, that was that. So maybe like a month or so goes by, and then we hadn't really talked after that because it was a little weird. But mind you, he goes to school where I'm at, so I would see him kind of around school, but he wouldn't say anything to me, wouldn't talk to me. About a month goes by, and he hits me up again. Same thing. So he hits me up, and then we kind of start talking again. It kind of starts with the same exact thing, and kind of leads to the same scenario. And he's like, hey, like, I want to hang out again. Like, da-da-da-da. Like, let me come pick you up. Mind you, didn't have my license, didn't have my permit or anything because I was, 13, 14? He ends up picking me up. I'm at a friend's house, and mind you, I was friends with his younger sister, and I'm not saying any names on here because if they know who they are, then they know. But I was actually, so I didn't really tell her that what had happened between us before, because I just thought that, I don't know, I felt like that was kind of like, I was disrespecting her as a friend, and I don't know, I just didn't know what the vibe was, even though I kind of knew him first, but I don't know, I just was a weird situation. And so, mind you, at this time, I was with her and a few other people hanging out, and like, I was like, if you want to hang out, like, this is going to be the only time I can probably go hang out with you, because my mom's not going to just, like, let me go out with any random guy. And so he picked me up, at that friend's house. It was during the day. He drives me over to his house. We go inside and we go up to his room. And probably, I don't know, pretty quickly, there's not really much conversation or like anything. Kind of just tries to get right to doing stuff. So we are, back in the same situation. Kind of similar vibe as before when we were in the car that night. And it gets to the point where we're both, completely naked again. And he tries to have sex with me again. And I say no. I tell him, I told you before, I don't, not trying to be rude, but I don't want you to be the first person I do this with, because this is the only thing. I know at the end of the day, I know you really don't give a shit about me. So this is I'm not trying to give up my last thing that I have to hold on to when in regards to this, with you. And I don't know if it was just because of his age or being a boy, I don't know, but he was just being pretty pushy about it. And I was in a really weird situation because I was like, okay, this kid drove me here. I don't have any way to leave. I feel really I almost went into fight or flight freeze mode at that moment. And he was just like, come on, just let me. Come on, just let me. And I just felt like we were just going back and forth and we just arguing, and it wasn't he wasn't really going to take no for an answer. So I was just finally I was like, all right, whatever. And I was like, I'm not letting you do this without wearing anything. You need to have a condom. I don't. I was just so scared. I was so young. I didn't know what the fuck was, happening. But I obviously knew that I don't want this kid to get me pregnant. And so he was already ready with it, which is disgusting. But anyways, or I'll spare you all with the details. But depends on if you don't want to hear explicit things, then I would skip forward towards the end, and that's totally fine. It's not everybody's forte. But this is just more of a PSA and to help other people who have been in similar situations, because I feel like there's a stigma of, oh, unless you said no the entire time or unless you left or whatever, you're technically consenting to this, and this is your fault. If they didn't do anything wrong, which is not the case at all. And I came to find that out later on. Back to the explicit. Basically, he starts to try to, enter inside of me. And I'm not sure if it was my genetics that weren't making it work, or if it was my anxiety and my fight or flight that was almost not allowing him to actually be able to go through. And I remember it was probably one of the most pain I've ever felt ever. And I was just kept saying, I'm it's not working. It hurts so bad. It hurt. This is hurting so bad. And he wasn't, and he was just stop, just let me. And he wouldn't stop. And eventually I could feel myself, bleeding a bit. And I was I want this to be done. I want to be done. And then he was like, it's not working. You need to flip over on your hands and knees, talking to me like a dog. And at this point I was just fight, flight, freeze. And I was just tunnel vision, because I'm what the hell is going on? This is not right. I know I've seen so much, been through so much, but I know that this is not how it's supposed to go. And I remember doing what he told me to, and it still wasn't working. And I could feel him just pushing me down and just trying as hard as he could, and tears were just coming down my face. And I just went just shocked, just no voice, nothing. Same thing, just no words, no nothing. I could just feel myself just crying, having so much shame inside of me that I felt I was so just so gross. I felt so just disrespected. I felt so objectified. And I remember finally he did it, and once he was finished, he got up and, oh, you bled on my bed. And that's all he said. And I remember just kind of sitting there like, I'm sorry. I don't know what you want me to say. It's not funny. I'm not laughing at that. I'm just like dark humor, covering up the trauma, you know? And then he's like, you should, you know, put your pants back on. I should take you back. And then we didn't say anything else, didn't talk. I got dressed. I was still in this like shock moment of like what just happened. And then he drove me back to that friend's house, dropped me off, and that was that. And then didn't hear from him. And then there's even like more into that story of how another time he tried to do it again, and then years later I tried to confront him about it, and he tried to do it again. So that was super cool. But at that time, that specific time, that changed everything in that part of me. For me, I felt like I just lost like all respect for myself. I had no longer any respect for myself. I didn't care who did what with me. I just didn't care, because I knew that I was holding on so hard to this one thing and was trying to stay strong for all these other things, because I was learning my worth again. This is right after I had come back to live with my mom. But that situation, it broke me. It really did. And it changed my perception on intimacy and sex in general and love. I no longer I never really associated sex with love, but I really didn't. Like, I was like, that's not love. I know that that's not love. And the more I started learning about it and learning about what rape and sexual assaults and all these things really entailed, it's because there's like such a fine line, people would say, between them. Like, oh, unless you're obliterated, drawn, like other people's scenarios, people can hear anybody that's a survivor, whether you're a male, a female, whatever you identify as, because men can be sexually assaulted as well. That's not a thing, and I don't want that to be seen like that is a thing, that only women are. But I just know that, yeah, so after that's, like I said, it broke me. I was numb, and yeah. And it wasn't until my first real boyfriend, I would say, that I started dating the end of my sophomore year, which is why I think one of the reasons I'll forever be grateful for him, no matter what anybody says, and to each their own, wish him the best, because he looked at me as just knowing these things and knowing like situations I had been in or what I had done per se. He still looked at me as like pure, and that like no matter, like, that didn't define me. Like, he loved me for me as a person. He thought I was beautiful inside out, and that just meant the world to me, because I thought in my head, after all these things, I thought no one's ever going to love me, no one's ever going to respect me, because who's going to respect somebody who didn't respect themselves, right? And that's not the case. But, you know, people make you think like that when they take away something from you that's so valuable and changes your perception on that. After, I think, having that from him, I was like, okay, like, I know that made me kind of learn how to respect myself again, because I realized that intimacy and sex can be such a beautiful thing. Like, even in the Bible, I mean, it's quote unquote meant for marriage and whatever, and everyone to each their own. Some people don't have that opportunity to, and that's just how it is. But it really can bind people together and like become a bond that shows off love, because I mean the dopamine and serotonin that goes all into it, there's so much science behind it as well, but it can really affect relationships very, very heavily. As I have grown older and I've kind of done more of my work, I realized that after that time, and up until probably only a few years ago, I was insinuating sex as that was the only way that I could show love to somebody, because I thought that that's all people wanted from me at that point. And two, when I was angry, that's what I wanted to do. When I was sad, that's what I wanted to do. When I was happy, that's what I wanted to do. I insinuated that as it is a type of drug. It's a type of, coping mechanism. I wasn't into drugs and alcohol at this time at all, and I was very turned off by that. But this thing is what kept me feeling like that quick fix, that fulfillment, even though the majority of those people probably didn't give a shit about me. And now I've learned that I am worth much more than that. And I think it's really important, especially in my relationship now, that learning that like I'm trying to differentiate the two and make sure that I never do anything intimate wise for any other reason other than in a love sort of way, because it is such a powerful thing, and it is such a beautiful thing when it's with the right person, or the person just who cares about you. And when you feel like, when it's right, when you are on board with it and it's right, because people have told me about their first time stories and they're like, oh, it was so beautiful, like like, or people are like, oh, like I thought it was going to hurt, like it needed. And genuinely, I feel like that probably is how it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, certain situations and scenarios, we don't all get that fairy tale event. And that's okay. We just have to move forward from there and re-narrate how we go about it after that. But I wanted to share that story and share what led up to that story, because I think that it's very, very prominent to who I am as a person and my growth from then, because sexual assault, sexual abuse, all of that is such a intense topic, and things happen more to people than you would realize, even if it's not exactly what you can constitute as an assault or some sort of way. And like I said, it doesn't always mean that just because, even if you quote unquote go along with something and you drop down that barrier of whatever boundary you held up, it doesn't mean that you wanted it either. It doesn't mean that you were consenting to that. Sometimes we do things and we have to do things in a moment to protect ourselves. And that's what we do. And I want people to understand that too, that if you've been in a similar situation, that you know more than anybody what happened in that situation, and you know the facts. You know how it went down. You know what you wanted in your heart and what you didn't want in your heart, vice versa. And if anything else happened to you, I just want you to please, if not now, if what I wish I would have spoken up is what I'm saying. And I know how hard it is. And I also, it's my favorite thing. I was actually just talking to my mom about this today. One of my worst things I hate hearing from people, and it's when they don't know these things about me. It's funny when they've been in conversations where people are like, I would never let myself get raped, or I would never let myself do this or have this happen to me, or da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just sitting there like, it's actually super different when you're in the situation, and it's, you just can't really say that, because it's not, like, it's that you just sound very ignorant saying that when people have, same thing. I would never become addicted to anything. I would never, like, okay, well, you haven't had the same experiences or anything, so why are you judging somebody else's experiences or saying that? Especially this is very important to be careful with the verbiage you use about situations regarding this stuff around anybody that you talk to, because you don't know what other people's experiences are or their situations are, and that might just trigger their own situation and invalidate their entire situation, their feelings, which has happened to me before, where I just, you start to think, is this a false reality? I just want you to know that your truth is your truth. And this is a very, very, very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive topic for me to talk about. And it's a very sensitive topic for others to listen to. And I know that there are plenty other survivors out there. and people with other situations. And if you ever feel like you want to just have somebody to just talk to about yours or just hear, that kind of concludes this episode. And I know it was a heavy one, and I tried to lighten it up without crying or showing too much emotion, because I know that can be really hard for others to see. And I also just wanted to reiterate again that I'm super grateful for all the love and support I've been getting on the last few podcasts. You guys are amazing, and let's just keep it going, you guys. Please, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe, like the video. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, please download the video or the podcast. Sorry. It really helps more than you guys know, and it helps me, and it helps get the word out, and me figuring out what you guys like and what you want to hear more of. So yes, I cannot wait to talk to you guys next week. I have a few ideas about what I'm thinking. Please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking to you guys again next week. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.